Yes.
You criticize the state of theory and political science.
You got to speak loud.
I'm sorry. You criticize the state of theory and political science, and, but you did so in a very general manner. I was wondering if you could become more specific about what you think is lacking in political science theory.
Well, I think what you've got to evolve in political science is you've got to understand the way institutions in the political science world, the institution organizations work. And they don't work the way they do in the economy, because opportunity cost framework in an economy means that the incentive structure is much more powerful to get change in the economy, assuming you allow open access, than there is in politics. In politics, the fact that you create political structure, you create interest groups, political parties, and so on, but how they work is certainly not very related to incentive structures. How I perceive the system working, if I don't like it, isn't going to change the way it's going to work at all. And indeed, my vote may have no count. So the first thing we've got to do in political science, in my view, I hope I've got a lot of political scientists who haven't left the room already and are listening. Yeah, put your head up. I see you there. We've got to think about a new framework. We've got to think about a new institutional organizational structure that characterizes how political policy making, how political systems work. Now we've made some mileage on that scope. And I have some friends that are doing very interesting work on it, but we're a long, long ways from it. I mean, we are pretty good at understanding how a market works. And we do a pretty good job in analyzing and modeling markets in various kinds of situations, and that's very impressive. That's not characterized by the way in which political systems work. Political systems, we still are a long ways from being able to characterize in the same way. Now, if you're a political scientist and disagree with me, good, but then see if you do something about it. Have I made you all speechless? No, there's somebody not speechless.
Your speech seemed to focus on the institutions which create both economic and political policy, but simultaneously you gave a definition of culture.
Speak louder so everybody can hear you.
Simultaneously you gave a definition of culture that seemed to have the ability to constrain the choices we make within these institutions and in creating these institutions, and thus the dynamism which these institutions would be able to create. So where do we look for kind of the formal or informal institutions that create this idea of culture, and how do we go about potentially if culture is the problem in constraining both of economic and political institutions? Where do we look to find, where this is grown out of?
Well, if I had about 10 hours, I'd at least get a start in answering your question, because obviously where you try to look is you're trying to find what kind of incentive structures actually exist in political systems, ours and others, how effective they are, how institutions that presumably they're built on, because they're all built on some kind of institutional organizational structure, how those work, and then once we understand that, then we can begin to see if we can't devise ways to make them, structure them so they work better. And that's not a good answer, but people your age are the ones that come along and try to figure these things out.
Please.
Yeah.
I have a question. If
You got to speak louder and stand up. I can hear you then.
If you eliminate, erase people's false consciousness, open up the culture to everybody, give everybody opportunity and mentors so that they know support them, etc. With the limited access, you said that they were very good in controlling violence. When anybody can have any opportunity, and we're in a transitional period now, how do you make it hang together?
How do I make it what?
Hold together. That's expression the center doesn't hold. How do you make all the institutions hold together so you don't really end up...
Well, that's a good question. I don't have a good answer, because I think that as soon as you try to evolve a different institutional framework, I mean, we know quite a bit about how, let's say, historically, the American or British or French or Dutch systems work. And because we've done a lot of really very good case studies on institutional organizational framework and how they work, we haven't looked at the integration of those very much, and that's something we need to do. We're creating a whole new framework now. the world we live in has no parallel with what we're creating, that is, in the past. It's much more complex. The institutions and organizations work differently, and as witness the fact that interest groups are evolving, that are attempting to thwart and constrain the continuous dynamic process, and may be successful in doing it down the road. All that we've got to work out. We haven't done it yet. But you're right that what we've got to focus on is how the institutional organization framework integrate and work together, and why they work the way they do and why they don't work. And we don't know that yet.
That will be the last question.
Okay. In reading your work, I have been kind of surprised because you talk about the role of political
Now,
scientists.
I can't hear you, and certainly they can't.
So you talk about the role of political scientists, economists, anthropologists, sociologists, and I've been surprised I haven't read much about social work. Meanwhile, we are the ones who are on the ground working with people and trying to understand the local
We have a
context.
good social work school in this
Yeah,
university.
and I'm part of
One
that
the
school.
things I like. It's the only compliment I've had about anything in this.
Yeah, and definitely we are the ones, many of us are the ones following your work, and I'm one of the students. So my question is, where do you see the role of social workers contributing in this new framework of trying to understand institutions, organizations, and working with the World Bank in third world countries?
Well, I think that the advantage of social work is that the people in it, first of all, belong to a lot of or come from a lot of different disciplines. Second of all, are typically not wedded to narrow focus on their disciplines, because if they were, they wouldn't be in social work. And so I think that it's places like this that we could hope to develop better theory and better analytical framework, and also because they interact with actual problems in society. From that to derive some suggestions about how to make it work better. So I think social work's a very good program here. That's the only good thing I've said about any program around here. Not history, buddy.
Just before we conclude, I wanted to invite all of you, as Professor Noss made it perfectly clear, there's a lot of work to be done. In November, the 4th to the 6th, we will be holding on campus a big birthday party to Douglass North, and because of his work and his legacy, these 3 days of partying will be dedicated to trying to answer some of the questions, but instead of 1 hour, we will have 3 days, and maybe by the end of these 3 days, we will be able to educate Professor Noss a little bit about the progress in political science.